The claiming auction was where the forgotten were sold. Seren stood among them, the broken, the barren, the shamed, knowing she was the most unwanted of all. A heavy veil covered her hair and shadowed her face, hiding what she could never let anyone see. The crowd whispered, "What horror lurks beneath that shroud? What creature hides among the desperate?" They weren't wrong to wonder. Beneath the dark fabric lay the truth that had destroyed her life. Silver-white hair, pale violet eyes, the marks of the void touched, a curse so reviled that even her own father had tried to drown her as an infant. She was an omen of death, a harbinger, a monster in human skin. No one would choose her. She would not be claimed if she hid her face. She would not be claimed if she revealed it. Then Alpha King Theron of Valdris arrived. Cold, beautiful, untouchable. A king who could have claimed empresses walked past every noble-born woman without a glance. He strode down the line of forgotten females, his expression carved from ice, until he stopped directly in front of Seren. His gaze dropped to her hands, to the worn leather cord wrapped around her gloved finger. A crude ring braided from strips of hide and centered with a small river stone. Worthless to everyone else in the world. The Alpha King stopped breathing. "I'll take her," he said, his voice fracturing like ice over a frozen lake. The hall erupted in chaos, but Seren stood frozen too, because she knew that ring. A starving orphan boy had pressed it into her palm 17 years ago, along with a promise she had never forgotten. "I'll come back for you." Neither of them understood what honoring that promise would demand of them both. The women had been lined up like cattle awaiting slaughter. Seren kept her head bowed, her gloved hands clasped before her, her breath shallow beneath the thick veil that hid everything she was. The great hall of Valdris had been transformed for the night, not into a place of celebration, but a marketplace for the unwanted. The claiming auction. The final destination for unmated females who had nowhere else to go. Around her stood the others. A widow with 3 pups and no family to take her in. A young woman whose scarred face told a story of fire and survival. An Omega so old that her childbearing years had long passed. All of them desperate, all of them hoping. Seren was not hoping. She was simply trying not to be seen. The auctioneer, a wiry man with spectacles perched on his nose, droned through the introductions with the enthusiasm of someone announcing grain prices at market. Female, 23 summers, capable of domestic work, fair health, no living pups. No one was listening. The gathered alphas, merchants, minor lords, widowers seeking housekeepers rather than wives, murmured among themselves, casting occasional glances at the platform. Their gazes slid over Seren and snagged. The veil. Always the veil. "What's wrong with that one?" someone muttered. "Must be hideous beneath all that fabric. Or diseased. Who would hide their face otherwise?" Seren's fingers tightened around each other. Let them wonder. Let them assume the worst. It was still better than the truth. Because the truth was worse than hideous. The truth was cursed. Her father stood near the back of the hall, arms crossed, watching with the cold satisfaction of a man about to rid himself of a burden. Her younger sister Lysara lingered beside him, beautiful and golden-haired, everything Seren was not. Neither of them acknowledged her. If no one claimed her tonight, her father had made it clear what would happen: slavery, the salt mines, a death slower and more painful than any swift execution. This was his final revenge for the crime of her existence. The auctioneer moved down the line, past the widow, past the scarred woman, past the aging Omega. He was approaching Seren now, and her pulse spiked with dread. Then the great doors exploded open. Every voice died. Every head turned. The presence that rolled through those doors was not the dominance of an ordinary alpha. This was something ancient, something forged in blood and winter, something that made even the strongest wolves in the room lower their eyes instinctively. Seren felt it like a hand pressing against her chest. "The Alpha King," someone gasped. Alpha King Theron of Valdris walked into the hall as though he had carved it from stone with his own hands, and perhaps his ancestors had. He was tall, impossibly tall, with dark hair that fell past his shoulders and eyes the color of a frozen river. Pale gray, piercing, utterly without warmth. Rumors said he was beautiful. Rumors said princesses wept when he refused their marriage proposals, and that poets had drowned themselves trying to capture his likeness in verse. But Seren thought beautiful was the wrong word. Beautiful implied softness, approachability. There was nothing soft about this man. He was a blade given human form. Why would the king come here? The whispers rippled through the crowd. He could have anyone. Why a claiming auction? Theron ignored them all. His gaze swept the platform with clinical precision, assessing, dismissing. He walked past the widow without slowing, past the scarred woman, past the aging Omega. His footsteps stopped directly in front of Seren. She kept her head bowed, staring at the stone floor, and her blood rushing so loudly in her ears she could barely think. The silence stretched. No one in the hall dared breathe. Then, quietly, lethally, "Look at me." Seren's throat closed. She couldn't. If she raised her head, the veil might shift, might reveal. "Your hands," he said, his voice dropping lower. "Show me your hands." Confusion cut through her terror. Her hands? Seren lifted them, palms up, still gloved. Theron's gaze locked onto her left hand, onto the worn leather cord wrapped around her ring finger. A crude band braided from strips of hide, centered with a small river stone worn smooth by years of touch. The ring a starving orphan boy had made for her 17 years ago in a frozen forest, moments before the slavers had torn him away. The Alpha King went absolutely still, his face drained of color, his eyes widened. For one impossible moment, the cold mask cracked, and beneath it, Seren glimpsed something that looked almost like pain. "Where did you get that?" His voice was barely a whisper. Seren's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Theron's hand shot out and gripped her wrist, not painfully, but with an urgency that made her gasp. His fingers were ice cold even through her glove, cold in a way that wasn't natural, wasn't normal. "Where?" he demanded again. "It was a gift," Seren managed, "from someone I knew, long ago." Something fractured in his expression. His grip tightened for just a moment, then released. He straightened to his full height, his face once again an unreadable mask of frost. But his eyes remained fixed on that worthless ring as if it were the most precious object in the world. "I'll take her," he announced. The hall erupted. The carriage moved through the night like a vessel cutting through dark water. Seren sat rigid on the velvet seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, the ring pressing against her finger through the glove. Outside, the city had given way to countryside, and now the royal palace loomed in the distance, a fortress of black stone and silver spires that seemed to pierce the stars themselves. She was going to be sick. Nothing made sense. The Alpha King, the most powerful man in the realm, had chosen her. Her, the veiled woman at the auction, the unwanted daughter, the void-touched curse that even her own father couldn't wait to be rid of. Why? The ring. He had reacted to the ring. But that was impossible. The boy who had given it to her was dead. He had to be dead. The slavers had dragged him away into the winter storm 17 years ago, and she had never seen him again. She had searched. She had waited. For years, she had worn his ring and prayed to gods she didn't believe in. He never came back. So why had the Alpha King looked at this worthless piece of braided leather as though it held the answer to every question he had ever asked? The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door, and Seren stepped out onto smooth obsidian stone, her legs unsteady beneath her. The palace rose above her like a mountain made of shadow and frost. "This way, my lady." She followed the guards through corridors that seemed to stretch into infinity. The walls were lined with portraits of past kings, their painted eyes following her progress. The air grew colder the deeper they went, unnaturally cold, as though the palace itself were carved from ice. Finally, they stopped before a massive door bound in iron. "His Majesty will see you now." The door swung open. The room beyond was a study, vast, dark, lit only by a fire that burned low in an enormous hearth. Shelves of books lined the walls, maps and documents covered a massive desk, and standing beside the window, silhouetted against the pale moonlight, was Theron. He didn't turn when she entered. Seren dropped into a curtsy, her veil swaying forward. "Your Majesty." "Rise." His voice was exactly as she remembered it from the auction hall, cold, controlled, empty of anything resembling warmth. She straightened, tension coiling through her limbs. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Theron remained at the window, his back to her, and every line of his body radiating restrained power. "You wear that ring?" he said finally. "Why?" Seren's throat tightened. "It was given to me by someone important. Someone I lost." "Lost?" The word came out sharp, almost bitter. "You think he's dead?" "I know he's dead." Her voice cracked despite herself. "The slavers took him. He was just a boy. Starving. Sick. He couldn't have survived." Silence. Then Theron turned. The firelight caught his features, and Seren's breath stuttered. Up close, without the chaos of the auction, she could see him clearly. The sharp cheekbones, the cruel beauty of his mouth, the frost-colored eyes that seemed to hold winter storms within them. And something else. A scar. Faded but still visible, running along his jaw. A scar she had seen before, on a boy's face, in a frozen forest, a lifetime ago. "No," she whispered. Theron's expression didn't change, but his eyes were burning. "The boy survived," he murmured. "The slavers sold him to the fighting pits. He killed his way out, clawed his way up from nothing, became a warrior, a general, and eventually, a king." Seren couldn't breathe. The room tilted around her. "You," she managed. I came back for you." His voice fractured for just a moment, revealing something raw beneath the ice. "I searched for years, but you were gone. Your family had moved, changed their name, and hidden you away. I thought—" He stopped, his jaw tightened. "I thought you had died." Tears burned behind Seren's eyes. All those years, all those prayers, and he had been searching too. "Why didn't you—" She stopped, shook her head. "How could you not know? I was at the auction, in your own kingdom. If you'd been looking—" "I was looking for a girl with golden hair and brown eyes." Theron's gaze traveled over her veiled form. "You wore no veil when I knew you. Your hair was the color of honey. Your eyes were warm." Seren went cold. He didn't know. He didn't know what she had become, what had been done to her, what she was now. The void touch had manifested when she was 12, 2 years after the slavers took him. Her hair had turned white as bone. Her eyes had shifted to pale violet. And her father, already resentful of the daughter who reminded him of his dead wife, had finally found his excuse to hate her openly. She was no longer the girl Theron remembered. She was a monster now. "Your Majesty," she began carefully. "There are things you don't understand. Things about me that have changed. I don't care." The words stopped her cold. Theron crossed the distance between them with predatory grace, stopping close enough that she could feel the unnatural cold emanating from his body. "I made you a promise 17 years ago. I intend to keep it." "What promise?" His hand rose, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers closed around hers, around the hand wearing his ring. Even through the glove, his touch was ice. "I promised I would come back for you," he said. I promised I would protect you, and I promised that one day I would make you my queen. Seren's stomach knotted with emotion she couldn't name. But I should be clear about something, Theron continued, his voice hardening back into frost. This marriage will be one of duty, not love. I am incapable of love. My heart is frozen, and it will remain that way. I will give you protection, status, wealth, everything you could ever need, but I will never give you warmth. He released her hand and stepped back. If you accept these terms, the wedding will take place in 3 days. You will be queen. You will want for nothing. His eyes met hers through the veil, cold and absolute. But you will never have my heart. Is this agreeable? Seren stared at him. This man who had been a boy she once saved, now offering her salvation with one hand and emptiness with the other. She thought of her father waiting to sell her to the mines. She thought of 17 years of hiding, of shame, of being called a curse. Cold over cruelty, she thought. Yes, Your Majesty, she breathed. It's agreeable. Theron nodded once. Then I will see you at the altar. He turned back to the window, dismissing her. But as Seren reached the door, his voice stopped her one final time. The veil, he said without turning. You hide yourself. Why? Her hand tightened on the doorframe. Because what's beneath would only prove that the girl you remember is gone, Your Majesty. She left before he could respond. But even as she walked away, she felt his gaze on her back. Cold, curious, and haunted by something that might have been grief. The morning of the contract signing arrived cold and gray. Seren had barely slept. The chambers they had given her were larger than any room she had ever occupied. A suite with a canopied bed draped in silver silk, a bathing room with water that steamed on command, and a team of servants who had arrived within hours of her request. Blind servants. Just as she had asked, when she made the request, she expected refusal, mockery, and delay. Instead, the head steward had simply bowed and said, "It will be done, my lady." And it was. 6 women who could not see her face, her hair, her cursed eyes. They bathed her gently in rose-scented water. They brushed her hair without flinching at its unnatural color. They dressed her in soft gray silk and arranged her veil with careful hands. No one had been gentle with Seren in a very long time. She wasn't sure whether to weep or run. Now, walking through the palace corridors toward the council chamber, Seren tried to steady herself. Her father would be there. The thought made her stomach twist into knots. He had come to witness the contract signing, to ensure the transaction was complete, to wash his hands of her forever, and to remind her, no doubt, of everything she owed him for not drowning her when she was born. The council chamber doors swung open. The room was enormous. A long table dominating the space, windows behind it letting in pale morning light. The Alpha King sat at the head, flanked by 2 advisors whose faces revealed careful neutrality. He was dressed in black. Of course he was. The color suited him, emphasizing the breadth of his shoulders and the sharp angles of his face. In the daylight, he looked even more severe than he had the night before, a king carved from winter itself. And at the far end of the table, deliberately not looking at her, sat her father. Lord Varon Ashford was a handsome man in his late 40s, silver threading through his dark hair, his jaw perpetually set in an expression of cold disapproval. Beside him sat Lysara, golden and beautiful in a gown of pale blue, her eyes flickering between curiosity and something that looked almost like jealousy. "Please sit," Theron said, gesturing to a chair near him. Seren sat. One of the advisors cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, the marriage contract has been prepared according to your specifications. If you would permit me to summarize." "That won't be necessary." Theron picked up the document, scanned it briefly, and then set it down. "I will explain the terms myself." His gaze found Seren, or rather, found the veil where her face should be. "First and most important, he said. No one will ever be permitted to see you without your consent. Not myself, not my household, not any member of my court or kingdom. You will receive veils of the finest make, servants who cannot see, and absolute authority over who views your face. Seren's breath caught. Second, Theron continued, you will be queen. You will receive lands, titles, wealth, and all privileges accorded to the crown. You will lack for nothing. She waited for the cruelty to follow, the catch, the trap. Third, he said, his voice dropping into something colder. We will not share a life beyond what is necessary. We will not share chambers. We will not dine together. You will attend royal functions at my side perhaps 3 or 4 times a year to maintain appearances. Otherwise, our paths will not cross. Seren felt her father's eyes on her, waiting for her to flinch, to weep, to beg. She kept her voice steady. And children, your majesty? You will give me heirs to secure the succession. Theron's tone remained clinical, factual. Once you have done so, our physical relationship will end. That is the extent of what I require from you. Her father surged forward. Your Majesty, I must protest. You don't understand what you're binding yourself to. If you knew what was beneath that veil, I wasn't speaking to you. Theron's voice could have frozen fire. I was speaking to my future queen. The words hung in the air, sharp as a blade. Lord Varen's face mottled with fury, but he forced himself back into his seat. Seren's blood rushed in her ears. My future queen, he had said. Is this agreeable to you? Theron asked. Seren thought of everything she had endured. The drowning attempt when she was 3 days old. The years of being called cursed, monster, omen of death. The beatings when her father drank too much. The isolation. The shame. This man was offering her safety, protection. A life where no one would look at her with hatred. And all he asked in return was that she expect nothing from him. Yes, Your Majesty, she said clearly. It's more than agreeable. You honor me greatly. One of the advisors coughed uncomfortably. Lord Varen looked as though he might explode. And Theron? Theron tilted his head slightly, a shadow of confusion crossing his features. Honor you, he repeated. I have just told you I will never love you, never share my life with you, and never be more than a distant stranger who happens to bear your title. And you consider this an honor? Seren met his gaze through her veil. Yes, Your Majesty, she murmured. Because you have also promised to protect me, to respect my wish for privacy, and to never look upon me with disgust. She paused. That is more than anyone has ever offered me. Far more than I deserve. The room went very still. Lord Varen's expression twisted with something ugly. Rage, yes, but also fear. He had expected her to crumble. He had expected Theron to realize his mistake and cast her aside. Neither had happened. Theron studied her for a long moment, his winter storm gaze unreadable. Then he pushed the contract across the table toward her. Sign here. Seren signed. Her father signed as witness, his hand shaking with barely suppressed fury. The advisor signed. And then, it was done. She was going to be queen. As they exited the council chamber, the corridor stretched before Seren like a gauntlet. Courtiers lined the walls, lords and ladies in silk and jewels, all of them staring, whispering, their curiosity a physical weight. Is that her? Why does she hide her face? The king could have anyone. Why choose this creature? Seren kept her head down, her hands clasped, her pace steady. Just 3 more days. 3 more days and she would be married and perhaps the whispers would fade. She was almost to the staircase when a hand closed around her arm. Lysara. Her sister's beautiful face was flushed, her golden eyes bright with something between anger and desperation. We need to talk, Lysara said. Now. Against her better judgment, Seren allowed herself to be pulled into a small alcove off the main corridor. A window overlooked the frost-covered gardens, gray light filtering through the glass. "You can still refuse him," Lysara said without preamble. Seren blinked. "Why would I refuse him?" "Because when he discovers what you are, he'll destroy you." Lysara's voice rose despite herself. "You think a king will tolerate a void touched as his queen? You think the court will bow to a woman they believe is cursed?" Seren's hands curled into fists beneath her veil. "He's promised never to look at me." "And you believe him?" Lysara laughed bitterly. "He's the Alpha King, Seren. Women throw themselves at his feet daily. Eventually, he'll insist on seeing your face. And when he does, when he sees those eyes, that hair—" "He'll what?" Seren interrupted. "Cast me aside? Send me to the mines? Kill me?" She shook her head. "Father has already promised me worse than that. At least with the king, I have a chance." Lysara stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You killed Mother, Seren. You know that, don't you? She died giving birth to you. And ever since that day, everything you've touched has turned to ash." Her sister's eyes glittered with unshed tears. "Father was right about you. You're a curse. And now you're going to curse the entire kingdom." The words hit like a blade between Seren's ribs. "I didn't kill her," Seren whispered. "I was a baby. I didn't—" "You destroyed our family?" Lysara's voice cracked. "And now you're going to destroy the king too. I can see it. The same way I saw what happened to Mother. To the servants who looked at you too long. To the stable boy who tried to help you." Dread pooled in Seren's gut. "Kieran died of fever. That wasn't—" "He looked into your eyes the day before he fell ill." Lysara stepped back, her expression hardening into something like fear. "Everyone who gets close to you dies, Seren. That's what the void touch does. It drains the life from those around you." "That's not true." "The king seems kind to you now," Lysara continued, ignoring her. "But mark my words. When he finally sees what you really are, he won't just reject you. He'll execute you for deceiving him." And honestly, her sister's smile was sharp and cold. "Maybe that would be mercy. For everyone." She turned and walked away, her golden hair catching the light. Seren stood alone in the alcove, trembling. The stable boy's face flashed through her mind. Kieran, 13 years old, with kind brown eyes. He had brought her extra bread sometimes, when her father forgot to feed her. He had smiled at her. And then, he had died. Coincidence, she told herself. Fever. It was fever. But the doubt coiled in her chest like a serpent, cold and patient. What if Lysara was right? What if the void touch wasn't just a mark? What if it was truly a curse? What if everyone who loved her was destined to die? Seren looked down at the ring on her finger, the crude leather band that Theron had made for her when he was a starving orphan with nothing else to give. He had survived. He had come back for her. But now she wondered if that survival was temporary. And if by marrying him, she was simply signing his death warrant. The cathedral bells tolled at dawn. Seren stood before the mirror in her chambers, her reflection a ghost draped in white silk and silver thread. The wedding gown was the most beautiful thing she had ever worn, perhaps the most beautiful thing she had ever touched. Layers of gossamer fabric cascaded to the floor like frozen waterfalls, embroidered with tiny crystals that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. And covering it all, hiding the bride beneath, was the veil. 3 layers of it. Thick enough that no one would glimpse even a shadow of her features. Heavy enough that she felt its weight on her shoulders like armor. The blind maids had dressed her with trembling hands, awed to be preparing a queen. They had braided flowers into her hidden hair without knowing its unnatural color. They had pressed perfume to her throat, without seeing her cursed eyes. "You look beautiful, Your Majesty," one of them whispered. Seren almost laughed. How would they know? But she simply murmured her thanks and turned toward the door. The carriage ride to the cathedral passed in a blur of noise and color. Thousands of people lined the streets, commoners and nobles alike, pressing against the barriers, straining for a glimpse of their new queen. "Show us your face," someone shouted. "Remove the veil," another demanded. Seren kept her head bowed, her gloved hands folded in her lap, her breathing deliberately controlled. They would see nothing. They would learn nothing. Not today. Not ever, if she had any say in it. The carriage stopped. The footman opened the door, and Seren stepped out into a roar of sound that nearly knocked her backward. The cathedral loomed before her, a massive structure of black stone and stained glass, its spires reaching toward a gray sky heavy with the promise of snow. The steps leading to its entrance seemed to stretch forever. She climbed them alone, no father to give her away. Lord Varen had made his position clear at the contract signing. He would attend as witness, nothing more. He would not pretend to care for the daughter he had spent 23 years trying to destroy. Seren preferred it this way. At least there would be no lies at this altar. The moment she crossed the threshold, the noise of the crowd faded to a muffled hum. Inside, the cathedral was a cavern of candlelight and shadow. Thousands of candles flickered along the walls, their flames casting dancing patterns across the faces of the assembled nobility. Every single face turned toward her. The whispers began immediately. "Why is she still veiled? Surely she'll remove it for the ceremony. What could be so terrible that even now, even here, she must hide?" Seren kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, where the altar waited. Where he waited. Theron stood at the end of the aisle, dressed in black velvet trimmed with silver, his dark hair pulled back from his face. In the candlelight, he looked like something from an old legend, a winter god descended to claim a mortal bride. His silver stare tracked her approach without blinking. His expression revealed nothing. But Seren noticed his hands. They were clenched at his sides, his knuckles white with tension. And even from this distance, she could see the faint mist that rose from his skin. As though he were so cold that the warm air of the cathedral turned to fog against him. "What are you?" she wondered. "What happened to you in those fighting pits?" She reached the altar. The priest began speaking, his voice echoing through the vast space, but Seren barely heard him. She was too aware of Theron beside her, the cold radiating from his body, the controlled stillness of his posture, the way his scent wrapped around her like frost on a winter morning. Alphas were supposed to run hot. Everyone knew that. Their blood burned with the fire of their wolves, their skin warm to the touch even in the deepest cold. But Theron felt like he had swallowed winter whole. "Do you, Theron, Alpha King of Valdris, take this woman to be your wife, your queen, your mate?" "I do." His voice was steady, empty, a formality, nothing more. The priest turned to Seren. "And do you—" "Wait." Theron's voice cut through the ceremony like a blade. The priest stuttered into silence. The congregation held its breath. Theron turned to face her fully, his gaze boring into the layers of fabric that hid her face. "Before you answer," he said, low enough that only she could hear, "you should understand something. I meant what I said in my study. I am incapable of love. My heart is frozen. Literally, not metaphorically. I cannot feel warmth. I cannot feel tenderness. I cannot feel anything but cold." Seren's breath caught. "You will be my queen," Theron continued. "I will protect you. I will honor the promise I made 17 years ago. But I will never be able to love you the way a husband should love a wife. Do you understand this?" "Truly." Through her veil, Seren studied him. This man who had been a boy she once knew, now offering her everything and nothing at the same time. "I understand, Your Majesty," she whispered. "And you still accept?" "Yes." Emotion broke through his mask for just a moment. Surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. Then he nodded once and turned back to the priest. "Continue." The rings were brought forward on a velvet cushion, 2 bands of silver set with pale blue stones that glittered like captured ice. Theron took her hand to slide the ring onto her finger, and even through her glove, she gasped at the cold. It was like being touched by death itself. His fingers were elegant, strong, and impossibly cold. And yet his grip was gentle as he guided the ring into place. "By the power vested in me," the priest intoned, "I now pronounce you husband and wife, alpha and queen, mates bound by sacred vow." The claiming. They needed to claim each other verbally, since the physical claiming, the bite, the mark, would require her to reveal her neck. "I claim you as mine," Theron said, his voice carrying through the cathedral. "My wife, my queen, my mate." Seren felt her wolf stir beneath her skin, restless, confused. There was no snap of a mate bond, no overwhelming sense of rightness, just cold and silence, and the weight of 17 years pressing down on them both. "I claim you as mine," she echoed. "My husband, my king, my mate." The priest smiled. "You may kiss your bride, your majesty." The cathedral went utterly silent, every eye fixed on Theron, waiting. Would he lift the veil? Would they finally see the mysterious queen's face? Seren's throat constricted with anxiety. Her fingers curled around her bouquet. Theron studied her for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand. He lifted her gloved fingers to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Gentle, formal, cold. The crowd erupted in confused murmurs. "He didn't remove the veil? We still can't see her face. What is wrong with her?" But Seren barely heard them. She was staring at Theron, at the man who had just honored her wish without question, without demand, without even a hint of resentment. "Thank you," she whispered. His frost-colored eyes met hers through the veil, unreadable. "You asked me not to look," he said, his voice low. "I keep my promises." Then he turned, offered her his arm, and led her back down the aisle. Behind them, the whispers swelled into a storm. The queen was still hidden. The mystery remained unsolved, and for the first time in years, Seren felt something other than fear. She felt hope. The wedding feast passed in a blur of noise and color. Serene sat at the high table beside Theron, separated from the celebration by her veil and by the wall of cold formality that surrounded her new husband. Nobles approached to offer congratulations, their eyes flickering with barely concealed curiosity. She accepted their well wishes with quiet grace, revealing nothing. Theron spoke when necessary, his responses clipped and precise. He did not look at her. He did not touch her. He did not acknowledge her presence beyond what protocol demanded. And yet, whenever a lord stepped too close, Theron's hand would brush against hers beneath the table, a brief, icy touch that made the interloper step back without knowing why. Whenever a lady's whisper grew too pointed, Theron would turn his wintry gaze in her direction, and the woman would fall silent mid-sentence. He was protecting her, silently, constantly, without ever admitting that was what he was doing. By the time the feast ended, Seren's nerves were wound so tight she could barely breathe. The maids led her to the royal chambers, a suite even larger than her previous rooms, dominated by a massive canopied bed draped in silver and black. They prepared her with trembling hands, rose-scented bath, soft nightgown, hair brushed until it gleamed, though none of them could see its cursed color. Then they left her alone. Seren sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap, anxiety coiling through her limbs. This was it. The consummation. The next step in the contract she had signed. She had known this was coming. She had agreed to it willingly. But that didn't stop the fear from pressing against her chest like a weight. 3 soft knocks at the door. "Come in," she managed. Theron stepped inside, and the temperature in the room dropped by several degrees. He had changed from his formal wedding clothes. Gone was the velvet and silver, replaced by a simple white shirt unlaced at the throat and dark trousers. His hair hung loose around his shoulders. In the candlelight, with his sharp features softened by shadow, he looked almost human, almost warm. But the mist that rose from his skin betrayed the truth. He closed the door behind him with a soft click, then stood very still, studying her from across the room. "You're afraid?" he observed. It wasn't a question. Seren's fingers twisted in the fabric of her nightgown. I haven't. I know." He didn't move closer. "I won't hurt you. That's not why I'm here. The contract requires an heir." His voice was clinical, detached. "But not tonight. Not until you're ready." Seren blinked. "What?" Theron crossed to the window, keeping his distance. "I told you I would protect you. That includes protection from myself." He paused, his back to her. "I know what I am, Seren. I know what this body feels like to touch. Cold, unnatural, unpleasant. That's not... I won't force you to endure something that brings you discomfort simply because a piece of paper demands it." He turned to look at her, his silver stare glittering in the candlelight. "When you're ready, truly ready, you'll tell me. Until then, we will share this chamber for appearances only. I'll sleep in the chair." Seren stared at him, warmth blooming unexpectedly in her chest. He was offering her time, patience, understanding. This cold, frozen king who claimed he couldn't feel anything was showing her more kindness than anyone had in her entire life. "You don't have to sleep in the chair," she heard herself say. Theron went still. "The bed is large enough for both of us," Seren continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can stay on your side, I'll stay on mine, but you don't have to be uncomfortable just because I'm adjusting." A long silence stretched between them. "You're not afraid of me," Theron said, as though trying to understand a puzzle that wouldn't resolve itself. "I've spent my entire life being afraid." Seren lifted her chin, though he couldn't see the gesture through her veil. "I'm tired of it." His mask slipped for just a moment. Surprise, perhaps, or something warmer. Then he nodded once. "Very well." He crossed to the bed with measured steps, giving her ample time to change her mind. She didn't. He lay down on the far side, leaving a careful distance between them, his arms folded over his chest like a corpse in a coffin. The cold emanating from him reached her even across the space, a gentle wave of winter that should have made her shiver. Instead, Seren found herself inching closer. "What are you doing?" Theron asked, his voice carefully controlled. "You're cold," she said simply. "You're always cold. Doesn't it bother you?" "I'm used to it." "That's not the same as it not bothering you." She moved closer still, until she was near enough to feel the full force of the cold radiating from his body. It was like lying beside a block of ice. Any normal person would have recoiled, but Seren had spent her life being called unnatural, being called wrong, being told that her very existence was a curse upon the world. She knew what it felt like to be treated as a monster. With deliberate care, she reached out and placed her hand on his chest. Theron went absolutely rigid. His breath caught. His eyes widened. "What are you—" "You're not freezing me," Seren observed. "I thought you would be, but it's just cold. Like a winter morning. Bracing. Not painful." She could feel his heart beneath her palm, beating fast despite his frozen exterior. Could feel the tension in his muscles, the war between pulling away and staying still. "How?" he breathed. "Everyone else who touches me?" "Maybe I'm not like everyone else." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them fully understood. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Theron's hand rose to cover hers where it rested on his chest. His touch was cold. His skin was ice. But his grip was gentle, and his eyes, when they met hers through the veil, held something that looked almost like wonder. "Perhaps not," he murmured. They stayed like that, hand over hand, heart beneath palm, until Seren's eyes grew heavy and sleep pulled her under. When she woke at dawn, Theron was gone. But the pillow beside her was still cold, And on the nightstand, she found a single winter rose, white as snow, cold to the touch, but beautiful nonetheless. The days that followed settled into a strange rhythm. Theron came to her chambers every evening, just as protocol demanded. He would enter with a nod, acknowledge her presence, and then retreat to his side of the bed. They barely spoke. They barely touched. But he always came. And Seren found herself waiting for him. She spent her days exploring the palace, learning its corridors, discovering its hidden gardens, navigating the whispers and stares of the court. The nobles watched her like hawks circling prey, searching for weakness, for cracks in her armor. She gave them nothing. But at night, alone with Theron, the armor fell away. "Tell me about the fighting pits," she said one evening, 3 weeks after their wedding. Theron's hand stilled on the book he had been reading. "Why would you want to know about that?" "Because I want to know you." Seren turned to face him, pulling her legs beneath her on the bed. "The real you. Not the king everyone fears, not the frozen warrior with no emotions. You." The silence stretched so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, his voice low. "The pits were designed to break you. Not just your body, your mind, your soul. They would starve us for days, then throw us into the arena against wolves twice our size. If you won, you ate. If you lost, you died." Seren's chest ached with sympathy. "How old were you?" "When they took me." 7. His voice was flat, empty of emotion. "By the time I escaped, I was 19. 12 years of killing to survive." "The cold," she ventured carefully. "Was that from the pits?" Theron's jaw tightened. "There was a witch. A powerful one. She ran the pits. Used her magic to make us fight harder, heal faster. When I finally killed her to escape, she cursed me with her dying breath." "What kind of curse?" "My heart would turn to ice. I would feel nothing. No love, no warmth, no joy. I would live as I had made her fighters live. Cold, empty, and alone." His eyes met hers through the veil. "She wanted me to suffer the way I had made her victims suffer." Seren reached across the distance between them and took his hand. His fingers were cold as death, but she didn't let go. "You were a child," she said fiercely. "You were a victim too. Whatever you did to survive, whatever you had to become, that wasn't your fault." Theron stared at their joined hands as though he couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. "You should be repulsed by me," he said. "I've killed more people than I can count. I can't feel warmth. I can't love you. And yet you touch me as though none of that matters." "It doesn't matter." "How can it not matter?" Seren smiled beneath her veil, though he couldn't see it. "Because I know what it's like to be called a monster, Theron. I know what it's like to be hated for things beyond your control. And I know that the boy who gave me this ring," she lifted their joined hands, the crude leather band visible on her finger, "wasn't a monster. He was kind. He shared his bread with me when he was starving himself. He made me a ring from scraps because he wanted me to have something beautiful." Her voice softened. "That boy is still inside you somewhere. The witch didn't destroy him. She just buried him in ice." Theron's hand trembled in hers. His breathing had gone ragged. "You shouldn't believe in me," he whispered. "Everyone who believes in me ends up disappointed." "Then I'll be disappointed." Seren squeezed his fingers. "But I won't stop believing." For a long moment he simply looked at her. This veiled woman who had somehow seen past his frozen exterior to something he had thought was dead. Then he lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. It was cold. Everything about him was cold, but it was also gentle. "I don't deserve you," he murmured against her skin. "Maybe not," Seren agreed, "but you have me anyway." That night, for the first time, Theron didn't retreat to his side of the bed. He lay beside her, close enough that his cold seeped into her warmth, and let her curl against his chest like a cat seeking shelter from a storm. Is this uncomfortable for you? He asked, his voice strained. The cold? No, Seren murmured, already half asleep. It's just you. I like you. She felt him go still, felt the sharp intake of breath that froze into mist above them. And then, so quietly she almost missed it, she heard him whisper, I like you too. It wasn't love. It couldn't be love. He had said so himself. But as Seren drifted off to sleep, she thought maybe it could be the beginning of something. Over the following weeks, everything changed. Theron began arriving earlier in the evenings before the sun had fully set. He would bring dinner to her chambers instead of making her sit through the awkward formal meals in the great hall. They would eat together, talking about everything and nothing, his kingdom, her childhood, books they had read, places they wanted to see. He smiled more. Small smiles, barely there, but real. And Seren found herself watching for them, treasuring them like rare gems. You're beautiful when you laugh, she said one evening before she could stop herself. Theron blinked, caught off guard. No one has ever called me beautiful. That's because they're terrified of you. And you're not? Seren tilted her head, considering. I was at first. But now? She shrugged. Now I just see you. Not the king. Not the legend. Just you. Something shifted in his expression. The ice in his gaze seemed to thin, revealing depths she hadn't seen before. Warmth buried so deep it had almost frozen completely. You should be careful, he said, his voice low. Seeing me too clearly might be dangerous. Why? Because I might start wanting you to. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Seren's pulse quickened. Would that be so terrible? Theron reached across the space between them and touched her veil, not to remove it, just to trace his cold fingers along its edge. I don't know, he admitted. I've never wanted anything before, not since the pits. Wanting things only led to pain. His fingers stilled. But with you, I find myself wanting things I know I can't have. What things? His hand dropped. He looked away. It doesn't matter. But it did matter. Seren could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the way his hands curled into fists, the mist that rose more heavily from his skin when his emotions ran high. He wanted her. He wanted to feel something for her. And it was tearing him apart that he believed he couldn't. That night, after he had fallen asleep beside her, Seren lay awake staring at the ceiling. I'm falling in love with him, she realized. With his rare smiles, with his unexpected gentleness, with the way he protected her without asking for anything in return. I'm falling in love with a man who says he can never love me back. She should stop. She should guard her heart, keep her distance, and remember that this was a contract and nothing more. But as she turned to watch him sleep, his face peaceful, the frost on his skin glittering in the moonlight, she knew it was already too late. She loved him. And that love might be the most dangerous thing of all. 2 months had passed since the wedding. 2 months of dinners together. 2 months of conversations that stretched into the small hours of the night. 2 months of falling asleep beside him and waking to find winter roses on her pillow. Seren had never been happier, and she had never been more terrified. Because something was wrong with Theron. She first noticed it 3 weeks ago, a slight tremor in his hands when he reached for his wine goblet. She had dismissed it as fatigue. Being king was exhausting after all. But then the tremors grew worse. Then came the coughing. Harsh, racking coughs that left him gasping, frost crystallizing on his lips. He would wave away her concern, insist it was nothing, and retreat into his cold silence until the episode passed. But Seren watched. Seren noticed. The mist that rose from his skin had grown thicker. The cold that emanated from him had intensified. Some nights, she would wake to find ice forming on the blankets where his body touched them. He was freezing from the inside out. You're getting worse, she said one evening, watching him struggle to hold a quill steady enough to sign a document. Theron's jaw tightened. It's nothing. It's not nothing. Seren crossed the study and placed her hand over his, stilling the tremor. Your hands are shaking. You're coughing up frost. The servants are afraid to touch you because you're so cold it burns them. The servants should mind their own business. Theron. She squeezed his fingers. Please, talk to me. For a long moment he said nothing. His wintry gaze stared at their joined hands, at the contrast between her warmth and his cold. The curse is progressing, he said finally, his voice flat. It was always going to progress. The witch designed it that way. A slow death rather than a quick one. More suffering. Seren's chest clenched painfully. How long have you known? Since before I found you. He pulled his hand away, turning toward the window. I've been dying for years, Seren. I just didn't care until now. Until now? He was silent for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, his voice rough. Until I had something to live for. The words hit her like a physical blow. There must be a cure, she said urgently. There must be something. There isn't. His voice was final. I've searched, consulted every healer, every witch who would speak to me. The curse is tied to my heart. The only way to break it would be to thaw the ice that has formed there. Then we'll find a way to thaw it. Theron turned to look at her, and his expression shattered her heart. Hopeless, resigned, already grieving. The ice doesn't thaw, Seren. That's the nature of the curse. The more I feel, the colder I become. The closer I get to warmth, the faster the ice spreads. His voice cracked. Don't you understand? Caring for you is killing me. Seren felt her veins turn to ice. No, she whispered. No, that can't be true. Every moment I spend with you, the curse accelerates. Every time He stopped, his hands curling into fists. Every time I want to feel something for you, the ice grows thicker. Tears burned behind Seren's eyes. Then stop. Stop caring. Stop spending time with me. If distance will save you, I can't. The words tore out of him like a confession. I've tried. Every night I tell myself I won't come to your chambers. Every morning I swear I'll stay away. But then I see you. And His voice broke completely. I can't stay away from you, Seren. Even knowing it's killing me. Even knowing I'm signing my own death warrant every time I touch you. The room spun around her. All this time she had been falling in love with him. And all this time, her love had been killing him. Just like Lysara said, everyone who gets close to you dies. I'm a curse, Seren whispered, tears streaming down her face beneath her veil. I've always been a curse. My mother died giving birth to me. The stable boy who was kind to me died of fever. And now you. No. Theron crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and gripped her shoulders. This is not your fault. The curse was placed on me years before I ever found you again. You didn't cause this. But I'm accelerating it. You just said... I said caring for you is killing me. That's my choice, Seren. Mine. His cold hands cupped her veiled face with raw intensity. And I would make it again. 1,000 times over. Because these months with you have been the only time in my entire life that I have felt alive. She was sobbing now. Great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. How can you say that? How can you... Because it's true. His forehead pressed against hers through the veil. Before you, I was already dead. Just a frozen corpse going through the motions of ruling. You woke me up, Seren. You made me want things again. Want warmth. Want connection. Want... He trailed off, his breath misting in the cold air between them. Want what? She whispered. His thumb traced her cheekbone through the fabric. You, he said simply. I want you. More than I've ever wanted anything. Seren's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the space of a single breath. He wanted her. This frozen king who claimed he couldn't feel, who had been cursed to die if he ever cared for someone, he wanted her. And that wanting was killing him. "We'll find a way," she said fiercely, gripping his wrists. "I don't care what the curse says. I don't care what the healers told you. We'll find a way to break it." Theron's smile was sad, beautiful, and utterly without hope. "My brave queen," he murmured, always believing in the impossible. "The impossible is all we have left." That night, Seren held him while he slept, pressing her warmth against his cold and willing it to seep into his frozen bones. And for the first time, she prayed. Not to the gods who had never answered her before, but to whatever force had brought them back together after 17 years. "Please," she begged silently, "please don't take him from me now. Not when I've only just found him again." The only answer was the sound of his labored breathing and the crackle of ice forming on the windows. The healer confirmed what Seren already suspected 4 weeks later. She was pregnant. The news should have filled her with joy. A child, Theron's child, growing inside her. The heir he needed, the family she had never dared hope for. Instead, she felt nothing but terror. Because in the same 4 weeks, Theron had grown measurably worse. The tremors had spread from his hands to his entire body. The coughing fits came daily now, leaving him gasping and weak. Frost rimmed his lips constantly, and the cold that emanated from him had grown so intense that servants flinched when they entered the same room. He was running out of time. Seren found him in his study, slumped over his desk, papers scattered around him like fallen leaves. He looked up when she entered, and the smile that crossed his face was both heartbreaking and radiant. "There she is," he murmured. "The best part of my day." Seren's throat tightened. "You should be resting." "I'll rest when I'm dead." He caught himself, wincing at his own words. "Sorry. Poor choice of phrase." She crossed to him, taking his frozen hands in hers. "I need to tell you something." "That sounds ominous." "It's not. At least I don't think it is." She took a deep breath. "The healer came this morning. Theron, I'm with child." The silence that followed was absolute. Theron's eyes widened. His hands tightened on hers so hard it almost hurt, despite the cold. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. "Theron?" she prompted gently. "A child," he breathed. "We're having a child." "Yes." Something cracked in his expression, the ice that had covered his emotions for so long finally shattering. Tears glistened in his eyes, freezing into tiny crystals before they could fall. "I'm going to be a father." "Yes," Seren said again, her own eyes filling with tears. "You're going to be a father." He pulled her into his arms with fierce strength, burying his face against her shoulder. His body shook with silent sobs, or perhaps with the curse's tremors. She couldn't tell anymore. "Thank you," he whispered against her neck. "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." Seren held him, tears streaming down her face, her heart breaking and soaring at the same time. But beneath the joy, fear coiled like a serpent. He was dying. They both knew it. And now they had a child coming, a child who might never know its father. "You have to fight," she said fiercely. "For me, for our baby. You have to hold on." Theron pulled back, his hands framing her veiled face. "I will try. For you, I will try." But even as he spoke the words, frost crept across his cheekbones, and his next breath emerged as a cloud of ice crystals. He was lying. He was losing the fight. The following weeks were a study in contrasts. Joy and despair. Hope and grief. Love and the slow, inexorable advance of death. Serene's belly began to swell with new life, while Theron's body continued to freeze from within. He tried to hide it, but she saw the ice creeping across his skin, the blue tinge to his lips that never faded, the way he would sometimes stop mid-sentence, gasping for breath that wouldn't come. She held him every night, pressing her warmth against his cold, as if she could somehow transfer her life force into his dying body. And somewhere along the way, Without planning to, without meaning to, she fell completely, irrevocably, devastatingly in love with him. Not the tentative affection of before, not the careful attraction she had tried to guard against. This was love. Raw, terrifying, all-consuming love that burned in her chest like a fire that refused to die. She wanted to tell him. She needed to tell him. But she was afraid. Because what if her love made the curse worse? What if hearing the words accelerated his death? Then, one night, she couldn't hold it back any longer. They were lying in bed together, his cold body pressed against her warm one, her hand resting over his heart. She could feel it beating, slower than it should, labored, struggling against the ice that encased it. "Theron," she whispered. "I need to tell you something." He shifted, his wintry eyes finding hers in the darkness. "What is it?" Seren's pulse raced, her mouth went dry. But the words spilled out anyway, unstoppable. "I love you." Theron went absolutely still. "I know you said you can't love me back," Seren continued, the words tumbling over each other. "I know the curse makes it impossible, but I needed you to know. Before whatever happens, I needed you to know that you are loved, that I love you, that I will always." "Seren." His voice was strangled. "Seren, stop." "I can't stop. I've tried. But I love you so much it feels like I'm drowning, and I love you too." The words cut through her confession like a blade. Serene's breath caught. "What?" Theron's expression was wild, frantic, terrified. "I love you. I've been trying not to. I've been fighting it with everything I have because I knew what would happen if I—" He stopped mid-sentence. His face contorted in pain. His hand flew to his chest, clawing at his heart. "Theron!" Seren screamed. He collapsed against the pillows, his body convulsing. Frost exploded across his skin, his chest, his face, ice spreading so fast she could hear it crackling. "No!" She grabbed his shoulders, shaking him. "Theron, stay with me! Stay with me!" His eyes rolled back, his body arched, and then he went limp, ice crystallizing across his entire torso, his lips blue, his skin white as snow. He wasn't breathing. "Help!" Seren screamed, throwing herself toward the door. "Someone help me! The king is dying!" Guards burst in. Healers were summoned. Chaos erupted around her. But all Seren could see was Theron's frozen body on the bed, his heart finally surrendering to the curse it had fought for so long. "I killed him," she thought numbly. "My love killed him." Just like Lysara always said. "Everyone who gets close to you dies." 3 days. 3 days of sitting vigil beside Theron's frozen body. 3 days of refusing food, refusing sleep, refusing to leave his side. He wasn't dead. Not completely. The healers said his heart still beat. Barely. So slowly it was almost imperceptible. But it beat. The curse had frozen him in a state between life and death, his body encased in ice so cold it burned anyone who touched him. Anyone except Seren. For some reason she couldn't explain. She could still touch him, could still hold his frozen hand without flinching, could still press her lips to his ice-covered forehead without pain. "You're different," one of the healers had murmured, staring at her with something like fear. "What are you?" Seren had no answer, but she knew who might. "Bring me a witch," she commanded on the 3rd day, her voice raw from crying. "A powerful one, someone who understands curses." The council protested. Witches were barely tolerated in Valdris, permitted only for minor healing. But Seren was queen regent now, with Theron incapacitated, and she made her will absolutely clear. "Bring me a witch, or I will burn this palace to the ground searching for one myself." The witch arrived within hours. She was old, ancient perhaps, with silver hair and eyes that held the weight of centuries. She examined Theron's frozen form without touching him, her gnarled hands hovering just above the ice. "This curse is old," she said finally, "and powerful. It feeds on emotion, specifically, love. The more he feels, the colder he becomes." "Can you break it?" Seren asked, her voice strained with urgency. The witch shook her head. "Not I. This is ice magic, bound to his heart. It would require fire to thaw, fire of equal or greater power." "Then find me a fire witch. Find me someone who can—" "There is no fire witch powerful enough." The old woman's eyes found Seren's, and something flickered in their depths. "But there might be another way." "What way?" The witch stepped closer, studying Seren with unnerving intensity. "Remove your veil." Seren's veins turned to ice. "No. I'm not asking to satisfy curiosity, child. I can sense something in you. Something unusual. Something that shouldn't exist." I said no. "Then your husband will die." The words hung in the air, brutal and final. Seren's hands trembled. Her stomach knotted with fear. She thought of Theron lying frozen on the bed, of the child growing in her belly, of the promise made 17 years ago by a starving orphan boy. With shaking fingers, she reached up and pulled the veil from her face. The witch's eyes widened. Silver-white hair tumbled down Seren's shoulders. Pale violet eyes met the witch's gaze. And there, on her forehead, gleamed the faint silver mark that had appeared the day her powers manifested, the mark of the void touched. "Impossible," the witch breathed. "You're a voidborn." "I don't know what that means." "The fearful call your kind void touched," the witch said, her voice sharp with urgency. "The correct term is voidborn, and it means—" She stopped, collected herself. "Who told you that you were cursed? Who told you your power was evil?" "My father. Everyone. The void touched are harbingers of death. We drain the life from those around us." The witch laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "That's what the fearful have always said about things they don't understand." She stepped closer, her eyes boring into Serene's. "The void touch doesn't drain life, child. It absorbs energy, dark energy, cursed energy. You are not a harbinger of death. You are a neutralizer, a purifier. Your very existence is designed to consume the darkness that others carry." Seren's mind reeled. "That can't be true. People who got close to me died. The stable boy. Did he die from being near you? Or did he die from a fever that was already in his blood?" The witch's voice was sharp. "Think, child. Did you ever actually hurt anyone? Or did others simply die around you and you were blamed?" Memories flashed through Seren's mind. Her mother, dying in childbirth. A common enough tragedy. Nothing to do with curses. The stable boy, who had been coughing for weeks before he finally succumbed to illness. Every death blamed on her. Every tragedy laid at her feet. But she had never actually caused any of them. "My father knew," Seren whispered, realization crashing over her like a wave. "He had to know. The mark, the powers. He told me they were evil, but he must have known what I really was." More lies, she realized with cold fury. Everything he'd ever told her was designed to control her. If he told you otherwise, he had his reasons. The witch's expression hardened. Fear, greed, control. The void-born are rare and valuable. If he kept you hidden, kept you believing you were a monster, he could control me. Serene's hands curled into fists. He could use my shame to keep me obedient, invisible, and powerless. Yes. Seren turned toward the frozen figure on the bed, hope blazing in her chest. "Can I save him? Can my power break the curse?" "It's possible. Your energy could absorb the dark magic that binds him." The witch paused. "But there's a risk. The curse is vast, ancient, and deeply rooted. Absorbing it could destroy you." "I don't care. And your child? The magic might—" "I don't." Care. Seren's voice broke. He is everything to me. If I can save him, I will, whatever the cost. The witch studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Then you'll need the seal that binds your powers. My powers aren't bound. Yes, they are. Partially, at least. The witch's eyes narrowed. Someone placed a limiter on you years ago, suppressing the full extent of what you can do. Without removing it, you won't have enough power to break the curse. Seren's blood turned to ice. My father, she breathed. He bound my powers when I was 12. He said it was to protect others from me. It was to protect himself from you, from what you could become. The witch's expression was grim. You'll need to confront him. Get the seal. Break the binding. Only then can you save your king. The ride to her father's estate took 3 hours. Seren pushed her horse to its limits, 2 of Theron's personal guards flanking her. Snow had begun to fall, thick, heavy flakes that turned the world white and silent. The Ashford estate loomed before her as the sun began to set. She hadn't been here since the day she left for the auction, and the sight of it made her stomach turn with old memories, old fears. But she wasn't the same woman who had left this place. She was a queen now, and she would not be afraid. The servants tried to stop her at the door. Lady, Your Majesty, Lord Varen is not receiving— He'll receive his queen, Seren said coldly, pushing past them. She found her father in his study, a glass of wine in his hand, standing before the fireplace as though he had been expecting her. Lord Varen Ashford looked older than she remembered, the lines on his face deeper, the silver in his hair more pronounced. But his eyes were the same, cold, calculating, full of barely concealed contempt. Daughter, he said, his lip curling on the word. To what do I owe this unexpected visit? You know why I'm here. Seren pulled the veil from her face, letting him see her clearly. The silver hair, the violet eyes, the void-born mark on her forehead. You lied to me my entire life. Varen's expression didn't change. I don't know what you mean. The void touch isn't a curse. It doesn't drain life. You knew that. Seren stepped closer, her fists clenched. You told me I was a monster to control me. You bound my powers to keep me weak. You made me hate myself so I would never question you. Ah. Varen took a sip of wine. So someone finally told you the truth. You're not even going to deny it. Why would I? He set down the glass, turning to face her fully. Yes, I knew what you were. I knew from the moment you were born. The silver mark, the way the shadows seemed to gather around your cradle. Your mother knew too. She was terrified of you. She died giving birth to me. You can't know what she felt. She died because of you. Varen's voice went cold. The void-born draw energy from those around them, especially at birth. You drained her life force while you were still in the womb. Seren's heart stuttered with pain. That's not— The witch said. The witch told you what you wanted to hear. Her father smiled, cruel and knowing. The truth is more complicated. You can neutralize dark energy, yes, but you can also consume light energy if you lose control. Your mother was simply the first victim. You're lying. Am I? He stepped closer, his eyes boring into hers. Why do you think I kept you bound? Not to control you, to protect others from you. You are dangerous, Seren. You always have been. Seren's resolve wavered. The doubt crept in, cold and poisonous. But then she remembered Theron's frozen body, remembered the child growing in her womb, remembered 17 years of being told she was worthless, unwanted, a monster. Her father had spent her entire life breaking her down, making her doubt herself, making her afraid of her own power. She was done being afraid. Give me the seal, she said firmly. Varen's smile widened. No. I wasn't asking. She moved before he could react, crossing the distance between them and slamming him against the wall with strength she hadn't known she possessed. The void mark on her forehead blazed with sudden light, silver fire that illuminated the entire room. What? Varen's eyes went wide with genuine fear. How are you? You underestimated me. Seren's voice was barely recognizable, deeper, resonant, thrumming with power that had been suppressed for far too long. You kept me weak, kept me afraid, kept me believing I was nothing. But I am not nothing, Father. I am a voidborn. I am a queen. And I am going to save the man I love. The door burst open behind her. Lysara stood in the doorway, her face pale and her eyes wide. Seren, she gasped. What are you? Stay back, Seren warned, not taking her eyes off her father. This is between him and me. But Lysara didn't retreat. Instead, she moved closer, her expression shifting from shock to something else, something that looked almost like hope. The seal, Lysara said, her voice trembling. I know where it is. Serene's grip on Varen faltered. What? I found it years ago. I didn't know what it was, but Lysara's voice broke. I heard what he said. About Mother. About you. Tears streamed down her face. I'm so sorry, Seren. I believed him. I believed everything he told me about you, and Later, Seren said, echoing words from what felt like another lifetime. We'll talk later. Right now, I need that seal. Lysara ran from the room. Varen struggled against Seren's grip. You can't do this. You don't understand what you're unleashing. Your power is too great, too dangerous. Then I'll be dangerous, Seren said coldly. For once in my life, I'll be exactly what you always told me I was. And I'll use that power to save the people I love. Lysara returned, breathless, pressing a small crystal sphere into Seren's hand. This is it. Break it, and the binding will release. Seren looked at the seal, this tiny object that had kept her imprisoned within herself for 11 years. Then she crushed it in her fist. Power exploded through her veins like liquid fire. The world turned silver. She could see everything, feel everything. Every thread of energy in the room, every heartbeat, every breath. And beneath it all, calling to her across the miles, she felt Theron's frozen heart. Holding on. Barely, but still holding on. I'm coming, she whispered. Hold on. I'm coming. She released her father, letting him crumple to the floor. Then she ran for her horse, leaving the Ashford estate behind forever. The palace was chaos when she returned. Servants ran through the corridors, their faces pale with terror. Guards stood at every door, hands on their weapons. And from the royal chambers came a sound that made Seren's blood run cold, the crack and groan of expanding ice. She pushed through the crowds, ignoring their gasps at her unveiled face, her glowing mark, her silver hair streaming behind her like a banner. The door to the royal chambers had frozen shut. Ice covered it in thick layers, spreading across the walls, the floor, the ceiling. Seren didn't hesitate. She placed her palms against the ice and let her power flow. The cold fought back, ancient, vicious, determined to consume everything it touched. But Seren was no longer the terrified girl who had been told her power was evil. She was a voidborn, a neutralizer, and she would not be denied. The ice hissed and crackled as her energy consumed it. Silver light blazed from her hands, her forehead, and her entire body. She pushed harder, drawing the dark magic into herself, letting it burn through her veins. It hurt. Gods. It hurt like nothing she had ever felt before. But she didn't stop. The ice shattered. The door burst open, and there was Theron. He lay on the bed, completely encased in ice, his body frozen in a position of agony. The curse had consumed him entirely, turning him into a sculpture of frost and despair. But beneath the ice, his heart still beat. Seren climbed onto the bed, her hands shaking, her power blazing. She pressed her palms to his frozen chest and closed her eyes. I love you, she whispered. I love you, and I'm not going to let you go. Not now. Not ever. She poured everything she had into him, her power, her warmth, her love. The darkness of the curse rushed into her like a flood, cold, vicious, hungry. It wanted to consume her, to freeze her from within just as it had frozen him. But Seren held on. She thought of the orphan boy who had shared his last crust of bread with her. She thought of the ring he had made her from scraps, the promise he had whispered before the slavers tore him away. She thought of the king who had chosen her at the auction, who had respected her wish for privacy, who had fallen in love with her despite knowing it would kill him. She thought of the child growing in her womb, their child, a life they had created together. And she refused to let go. The curse fought. The darkness raged. But love was stronger. Inch by inch, the ice began to melt. Water streamed from Theron's body, pooling on the bed, dripping onto the floor. His skin shifted from white to pale to something approaching normal. His lips lost their blue tinge. And then, he gasped. His eyes flew open, gray eyes, no longer frozen, no longer empty. Alive, warm, terrified. Seren, he croaked. Seren, what? She collapsed against him, her power finally spent, her body trembling with exhaustion. I saved you, she managed. I told you I would. Theron's arms wrapped around her with fierce strength. She could feel his skin, warm now, actually warm. The cold that had defined him for so long was gone, replaced by the natural heat of a living body. You're warm, she whispered in disbelief. You broke the curse. His voice was thick with wonder, with tears. You actually broke the curse. My power. I'm a void-born. I can absorb dark energy. The words tumbled out in an exhausted jumble. My father lied to me. I was never a curse. I was... Seren. Theron pulled back just enough to frame her face with his hands, his warm hands. And for the first time, he truly looked at her. Unveiled, unhidden, her silver hair spilling around her face, her violet eyes meeting his, her void-born mark glowing softly on her forehead. You're beautiful, he breathed. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You don't think I'm beautiful, he repeated firmly. The most beautiful thing I have ever seen. And I don't just mean your face. He pressed his forehead to hers, his breath warm against her skin. I mean your heart, your courage, your stubborn, impossible, magnificent heart. Seren laughed through her tears. I thought I was losing you. You almost did. His voice cracked. But you didn't. You came for me, just like I came for you. He kissed her then, properly, fully, without barriers or veils or the cold that had always separated them. His lips were warm, his touch was fire, and Seren melted into him as 17 years of waiting finally ended, 6 months later. Seren stood in the palace gardens, their daughter cradled against her chest. The baby had her father's gray eyes and her mother's silver hair, a combination that had sent the court into whispered speculation and quiet wonder. Theron's firstborn, the Princess of Valdris, a child who would never know the cold. She's beautiful. Seren turned to find Lysara approaching, her expression tentative. Things between them were still healing. Years of hatred and misunderstanding couldn't be erased overnight. But they were trying. She has your chin, Lysara said, smiling softly. And Mother's nose, I think. Mother. Seren tested the word. It still hurt, but less than it used to. I wish she could have met her. She would have loved her. Lysara reached out and touched the baby's tiny hand. She would have loved you too, Seren. Father made you believe otherwise, but... Her voice broke. She loved you. I remember that much. She loved you from the moment she knew you existed. Seren's throat tightened. Thank you for telling me. Footsteps approached. Theron appeared around the corner, dressed in simple clothes rather than formal robes, his dark hair disheveled from sleep. He looked like a man now. Not a king, not a frozen legend. Just a man who loved his wife and daughter. "There are my girls," he murmured, pressing a kiss to Serene's temple and stroking their daughter's cheek. "How is our little miracle today?" "Hungry," Serene said with a tired laugh. "Always hungry." "She takes after her father." Theron grinned, a real grin, the kind he still seemed surprised to feel. "I was a bottomless pit as a child." "Before the slavers took you?" "Even after." His expression softened. "Food was survival in the pits. I learned to eat whenever I could, however much I could. It's a hard habit to break." Serene leaned into him, absorbing his warmth. "We never talked about it." "The pits. What happened after you escaped?" "We have time now." He wrapped his arm around her, pulling both her and the baby closer. "We have all the time in the world. No curse, no secrets, no ice between us. Just warmth." "Just warmth," he agreed. They stood together in the garden, the three of them, as the sun set over Valdris and painted the sky in shades of gold and rose. Behind them, the palace hummed with life, servants preparing dinner, courtiers gossiping, guards changing shifts. Lord Varon Ashford sat in a prison cell, stripped of his titles and lands, awaiting trial for his crimes. Lysara had taken a position on the Royal Council, determined to help rebuild the relationship between her family and the crown. And somewhere in the nursery, a leather ring sat in a velvet box, crude, worthless to anyone who didn't know its story. But to Serene and Theron, it was priceless. A promise made by a starving orphan boy 17 years ago. A promise kept by a king who had fought his way back from death itself. "I love you," Serene murmured against his shoulder. Theron pressed a kiss to her hair, his arms tightening around her. "I love you too, Dio," he said. "More than I ever thought possible. More than I ever knew I could." And this time, when he said the words, no curse stirred. No ice formed. No cold crept through his veins. There was only warmth. Only love. Only forever.